You're listening to Catching Wildfire, a podcast by the Public Safety Broadband Technology Association. My name is Jeff Johnson. I am the retired fire chief from Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, past president and executive director for the Western Fire Chiefs, and former inaugural vice chairman for the FirstNet Authority. And I'm your host today, along with Chief Kim Zagaris, a virtual wildfire icon in California. He served for 18 years as the head of Cal OES. He is a senior wildfire policy advisor for the Western Fire Chief, and the guy is a savant. And he and I are so fortunate today to have with us Chief Brian Fennessy, the fire chief of Orange County Fire Authority in California, and the former chief of San Diego, California. He is the immediate past president for the California Fire Chiefs. He is the also a past president for the California Metropolitan Fire Chiefs and the chairman of California Fire Scope. All huge jobs with huge responsibility. So, Chief Fennessy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chief. It's great to be here with you and the national treasure.
He is the national treasure here. He came by that nickname honestly. So it's wonderful to have you, Chief. Well, Chief Fennessy, we've been looking forward to this, and you know how we feel about you. You are an icon and truly one of those people that is changing this profession for the better. And as I reflect on your career, and you and I have known each other for decades, I mean, first thing I think of is given your personal success in so many ways professionally, what are a couple lessons that you'd like to pass along to the officers coming up, reflecting on your entire career? Like, what strikes you as you look back?
Well, thank you, Chief. I'm humbled to be here. That's really generous of you to say. I certainly don't consider myself an icon of anything. I would largely say that you two are the icons, but no, it's an honor to be here. And what I shared with somebody that asked me about this podcast, he says, yeah, when Chief Johnson and Chief Zagaris asked, I said, these are two of the guys that, man, if they told me to be somewhere tomorrow without much other detail, I'd be there, because I do. I respect you both, not just as obviously as friends, but and colleagues, but as mentors. So, and I mean that sincerely. It's funny, right? And you guys have both been there. As I get towards the twilight of my career, right? I got started back in 1978 as a U.S. Forest Service hotshot, and spent 13 years in the hotshot community, leaving as a crew superintendent before going to work for the city of San Diego as a firefighter. And man, it's so funny, right? When you're young, you think you know it all and everything else. And when I look back, and especially when it as it pertains to leadership style, what a terrible leader I was, right? I largely was a product, and I think you guys can relate, of my upbringing, which was very much do as you're told, and you don't ask a lot of questions. And I responded well to that. And as I grew into supervision, I mean, I'm 24 years old. I'm now a hotshot crew foreman responsible for a 10-person module on a hotshot crew. I look at my kids are older than that now, but I look back at when they were 24 years old, I would have never given them 10 lives to be responsible for. Right? And so you literally had to learn on your feet. And my leadership mantra was very much, kick you in the pants, yell and swear at you, and tell you what to do. And it wasn't until, somebody that really is an icon within the hotshot community that's been long retired took me aside and suggested to me that there may be a different way of getting people to do what you'd like them to do, other than my method. Go figure, right? And I didn't know what that meant, but as a result of him and relationships ever since, I'm still trying. I'm not the perfect leader, but man, I don't know if anybody tries harder than me. I really work at it hard to be the best I can be, and I've learned so much from you. So that's kind of the long prefix. I would say what I've learned more than anything else is to be authentic. Is that people know who you are, and if you try to be something you're not, this is for the new chiefs. We all look for it, right? We firefighters, we're looking for you to slip up.
Yep.
You get you're the new battalion chief, or you're the new, you name it, whatever. We're all watching, and the minute you slip, we're like, I knew it, I got you. You're not. Whereas if you're just yourself, right,
Yeah.
and you are what you are, and you acknowledge that you've made mistakes along the way and those sorts of things, but you have a job to do, I think people really respect that. And the other, probably the second thing is just the persistence, right?
Yeah.
I've seen so many people with good, and I know you have too, with good ideas that after a no or two, they kind of give up on it, and you can't. You gotta, man, if you really believe in it, you gotta persist, and over time, I think you will survive. And so those are probably two things that are important. Obviously, the relationship piece, probably more key than anything. But long answer. I apologize. I know we only have an hour, so
Well, I think those are great, right? I used to tell recruit academies when I'd bring them in that the only sure way to get fired at Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue is lie, cheat, and steal. Because our rule was you lie, cheat, or steal, regardless of rank or tenure, and you're out. And I used to tell them, don't think you're being judged. If it's illegal, immoral, or unethical, I've seen it or done it personally. I was a horrible company officer, and I learned skills as I came up, and I had some good mentors. So I really like what you said about being authentic. And the other thing about you, you would probably not say, but you're very approachable. I don't think you put off this air that you're the smartest guy in the room. Even if you are, you don't put it out. And I think that makes you approachable. And when you're approachable, it seems like people are more willing to share their ideas with you. And people will zip their mouth if they think they're going to say something stupid and get it rammed in their ear. It's just kind of interesting. And I think you do that very well.
well, thank you, Chief. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm probably never the smartest guy in the room, and it goes back to right remembering where you came from. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm no different, probably a little bit smarter and whatnot, but um, if I don't measure up to some that have high, whatever, and
yeah,
you do the best you can and try to be the best leader and keep on learning, right?
yeah,
I hear it a lot, be a student of leadership. Well, you got to really mean that, and you've got to be vulnerable, and you've got to be willing to say, man, I screwed that up. I mean, publicly when you get it wrong, and I think
absolutely.
people respect that. And to your point about lying, cheating, and stealing, it's all about values. And that's
Yeah,
the thing what I've learned about values. People will tell you they hold values, these core values, dear to them, this and that, and then they slip. And then once that happens, right? I mean, the doubt is cast, and you may not be able to recover from that. So if you truly believe it, you'll be fine. You never have to worry about it,
yeah,
which is kind of relieving, right? You
yeah.
just be yourself and try to do the best you can. And yeah, I
Do,
like people that are approachable.
do you think you learn more from good leaders you work for or bad ones? I reflect and I think how many times in my life has said I'm never going to do that to people.
Right? No, man, I think it's the bad leaders too. And so when you will, like I say, you and Chief Z been doing this a long time, and we've all heard about bad leadership and others because we get calls from people, and in some ways that's a positive, right? Because you're learning so much about how you don't want to be, and sometimes just observing those leaders, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
thinking to yourself, it's like, wow, man, that ego is man, to me, ego just means that somebody's insecure. The larger their ego is, the larger their insecurities about who they are and maybe how they feel they are, and they overcompensate.
yeah.
But that ego is a killer. I mean, none of us are that important.
Oh, I love it. Chief Z, you have to have some thoughts.
What a great day to be with two leaders as yourselves. And, as Brian was talking and you're talking, I'm thinking, what makes you guys so different? And my thought is, not only are you both really sharp, but you're both great risk takers. And I always believe that you have to take risk to be a good leader because if you're risk averse, you're not going to get very far. So I think, you know, I think a good leader also, and agree with Brian, is not the smartest person in the room, but you got some of the smartest people around you,
Yeah, for sure.
and you
That's right.
listen, and you get things done. And it's not about you. It's about the people we serve and the people that we're there to protect and take care of. So, sure, Brian never thought after 13 years being a hot shot with his head down on the ground with a tool that he'd be sitting where he's at today. But then, I, I, I also tell people, I said, in all the years that I've interviewed people or been interviewed, I don't remember anybody saying, "Hey, how do I get to be the fire chief?"
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever says, "I want to be the fire chief."
Yeah. We were all tricked.
Then I thought,
I've only met one guy that says he ever was, and I felt so bad about it. I got here to Orange County almost 8 years ago, and I was telling the same thing, Chief. I was on a podcast and saying, God, who would ever want to be the fire chief? I said, that was the farthest thing from my mind. When I committed to be a 3-bugle chief, I was in my late 40s and thought, well, it's my turn to give back. And it was a, classified at will position, so salaried position. And man, that was good with me. And then retirements start to happen, and then people are like, well, you're probably looking at the next thing. It's like, oh, okay, I guess. And never dawned on me the fire chief thing. And then over time, more people are retiring, and then pretty soon it's like, the music stopped and all the chairs are taken, right? And so there you are. But I agree with you, Kim. I mean, that was never anything on my to-do list. And the one guy that did when I got here, I told this story, right? And he pulled me aside after. He goes, and it was really nice about it. He was a battalion chief, and he told me, well, Chief, I'm actually one of those guys that have been aspiring to be a fire chief since I came in the fire service. And I thought he was joking. I was like, no, come on. And I laughed, and I could tell that he was serious. I said, listen, I apologize. I shouldn't make fun of that, because we need people to do that. I just genuinely had never met anybody until now that wanted to be a fire chief. And he's a quality individual, and I think he will be a fire chief someday.
Yeah, gotta love it. Well, it's true.
It's good to have goals. So, Brian, we live in some profoundly dynamic times in public safety. And, you see a lot, do a lot. I mean, we just saw each other on Tuesday this week at Red Sky, and you and Tony were up on the stage talking about the LA fires. What are the most significant opportunities that are before us in the wildfire and with wildfire and technology? What do you think? I mean, you just came from, a very packed full day of wildfire and high tech. And what do you think?
Yeah, no, that was inspiring, right? I mean, I've been to all 3 of them, and each one just gets better and better. And I was sharing with somebody afterwards what the difference was. And I mean, there were a lot of differences, but for the first 2, I know I and others, and I think you as well, Chief, were sharing with the group that, technology had outpaced, the fire service's willingness to adopt this, and that our fear was at some point, these venture capitalists and funders and all these people are going to go, well, I guess the Wildland Fire Service is not really interested in progressing. And now they devote their time and resources to other things. I mean, I was really fearful of that. And I think this time around, we saw, and heard of cases where the industry had meshed with the fire service and had seen some projects and programs that were moving along. So it seemed to me that the fire service, well, it's probably not caught up yet. Man, they're starting to close that gap. And so for me, that was pretty encouraging, and you're right. You're around these people that are very much like-minded. And granted, some of the things you hear, you scratch your head, but I think, you have to be open to that stuff. I met a guy there, I don't know if you did, Chief, that talked about his company, what they're doing is preventing lightning. Preventing lightning. I'm like, what? What do you mean you're going to prevent lightning? Tell me about that. I mean, because you got to have a curiosity too. And I think the 3 of us, we all share that curiosity, right? I'm just curious. What? And he explained and how NASA did it. So this guy wasn't a kook. I mean, he actually, and he had case studies, and I want to talk to this guy more. I mean, that's all
Right.
that he did. And so he reached out to me via email today, and I don't know, met some Israelis that, recently retired special forces intelligence folks. And what they shared with me, and you'll love this, they said, listen, we have the ability, Chief, to put a payload precisely, and they were like, precisely where a payload needs to go. I'm like, ooh, I bet you do. I bet you guys are very good, right?
I bet they are.
And so, they're thinking, you think land based or air? They go both. And so that's way out there. But if you don't listen to these people, right? I mean, you gotta let it goes back to what Chief Johnson said, being approachable and listening and being honest with them and sharing, look, this is I'm curious to learn more. But so back to answer your question, I think we're seeing that the gap close. I know that Western Chiefs is very engaged in technology and such. We're seeing and hearing about what is it, the Science and Technology Office of Science and Technology in DC and in Washington are developing, I think, in the coordination with maybe even Western and other stakeholders, a technology roadmap. And I think I think that this will also help the technology gap. I just had a conversation. We had several of them at Red Sky about people. People equate IT to technology, right? They make this. If you're the IT manager, director, then you must know everything about technology, right? And so you've got these IT people out there leading in areas that they shouldn't lead. These are things we, the fire service, know what we need for our people and whatnot. And having an IT background, I think, is great, but it's not the same thing. And I think we heard and saw that, and I'm encouraged, by hearing about the low orbit satellites, the suborbital platforms, it's not, uncrewed aircraft is not the only thing. There's value to crewed aircraft, but where all these pieces fit to provide, ultimately the firefighter on the ground information that'll keep their people safe, they'll make good decisions. And above that, the policymakers get benefit, the EOCs, everybody benefits from that. But my focus has always been on that firefighter on the ground. What do we do to keep, how does technology keep them safer, and provide them with information? So I don't know. Long answer, might have missed the target.
You guys are just saying some really cool stuff. And Chief Fennessy, one of the things you said was, well, I don't necessarily understand all that technology and, to the level they do. And, got private equity companies in here trying to evolve into the space and whatnot. And the way I look at that, it's hard to be a chief anymore if you don't understand the terminology and you don't understand what it is, right? If you don't know what a cloud is, you need to. If you don't understand what a router is, a mobile or fixed, you need to. If you don't understand the difference between, LTE and 5G, you need to. It's not that you have to be engineer level, but you have to be able to apply it to your life set skills in the profession so that you know which tool you need. Someone over there will get that tool and make it do what you want it to. I just have to know if it's possible. And to know if it's possible, I basically have to understand the terms. And I think you guys have done a great job of understanding that. Like you say, Red Sky Summit, they're fabulous at it. Now, I just want to live long enough to see what some of these things like the Optimus robots are going to do to a wildfire environment. Can they make our firefighters safer? Is the swarm technology that we're watching on unmanned ground vehicles, that swarming technology, is that something that we're going to bring to bear for tech? And I just think, you guys know I'm a nut and advocate for FirstNet, but none of this stuff is possible if you don't have a tenacious and reliable network. And that's the backbone of it. And that's one thing the tech guys get that some of us fire people have been slow to get. So that kind of leads me to my next question, Chief, which is if you could quadruple the speed of anything you see, that's aimed toward the street, headed to our average firefighter, What is it and why? Before you answer that, I just want to say, I remember when you were pushing nighttime wildfire air operations, and no one in the country had done it. No one thought it was a great idea. Guess what? It's a great idea. It's one of the many things that you pushed. So that's kind of the foundation for if you could quadruple the speed of anything you see aimed at the street, what is it?
Boy, that's a good one. And man, you're right about everything you said. I got people like Kevin Fetterman, right, that not only talks the language but
Yeah,
understands and can
yeah,
operationalize what we kind of envision in our heads and making that connection. You know, in terms of what it is, certainly the adoption piece, right? And that's not something necessarily that's so tangible, in terms of equipment or something like that. But I'd like to see that, to your earlier point, Chief, that the fire chiefs today have that basic understanding of everything you just shared, right?
yep,
And why.
yep,
And what really concerns me is, this reauthorization, of FirstNet and this and that. And the chiefs that you all 10 years ago were going around and meeting when we were looking for the states to adopt it, a lot of those people are retired. And so now we've got this new group, and we're finding we're having to educate these. We assume that they were educated by those that you educated, but we're finding that's not the case.
right,
So many people are going, well, why is this important? And what about Verizon and T-Mobile and these others? And you're going to go, oh, stop. And you end up having to provide a history lesson of how we got to where we got. And
right,
for
right.
us, it don't seem like that long ago, right? But and so, you got to hope that those are out there. So I appreciate what FirstNet's doing and getting out there into these conferences and really educating, the fire service. In terms of the tech, like you, I mean, what is in our future? I think autonomous, not just aircraft, but certainly ground resources. You talked about the robots and whatnot. I think those are fabulous. That we're going to see enormous advances in that. We had, I don't know, a year or so ago, a group of SEALs, Navy SEALs, come by. And these guys are experimenting and working on. Actually, we saw it in action. It's almost like bionics, right?
Yeah,
Something that they slip over, their legs or whatever, and allows them. It's an enhanced way of them
yep,
climbing up that hill, right?
yep,
So now they get to the top of the hill quicker and not exhausted. Things that are going to enhance, human performance. How do we know
yes,
that? It seemed very Terminator or whatever, and you looked at it, but the more you thought about it, it's like, man, that's pretty good, because our limitations, our human limitations, are such that we don't make as good of decisions as we could if we're tired all the time. How do we get from point A to point B? I was on a call yesterday with Cal Fire's folks, Scott Gregory and Jake Sholin, and some of those folks that are working in not so much the autonomy space, airspace, but some of the enhancements to the aircraft that we're looking at that reduce pilot workload, right? And that Sikorsky and others are starting to install. Hadn't
right,
really thought about it, but they're experimenting on, hey, how do we move hose packs up the line in such a way that now the crews that, it's not on your back all the time. You leave that
right,
engine. How can we extend the, hose? I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but I think the fire service is still pretty basic, right? In many ways, it still is getting the wet stuff on the red stuff. And if we can extend hose lays, or our crews can work safer, smarter, those are the kind of technologies that I'd really like to see. I think expanding on what you said about the night, what's really puzzling to me is I would think that, right, we're dropping air tankers all day. We're dropping Phos-Chek, retardant all day, nonstop. But the
yep,
minute it becomes nighttime, right, all that ends. Well, now we've got aircraft, these CH-47s that are dropping 3,000 gallons. That's a C-130, depending on whether it's a 3,000 or 4,000 gallon capacity. I mean, but it's a large air tanker.
yep,
And we're moving, the QRF moves a mobile retardant plant close to, the site of that incident, where we've shown with even just 3 helicopters, we can outpace and put more retardant on the ground overnight than all of those air tankers did during the day. So you would
right,
think that, wow, the agencies ought to embrace that concept. put a dozen of these on contract, start moving them, because you're right, Cal Fire and others are starting to use big helicopters at night. And we just start, putting retardant down day or night. Man, it's like pushing that big old rock uphill, something that seems so basic. And to your earlier point, I think as we persist, we're going to see that someday. But why is it? I'll ask you guys, why is it so hard? Why is what seems to be to us some of these simple concepts, why is it so hard?
Yeah, that's right. There's just innate resistance to change. I think that's A. I think B, I remember chiefs when I was near the end of my career. I spent 15 years as chief at TVFNR. I remember about 3 years before the end of my career, a division chief came in and he was telling me what needs to change. And listen, there's a good division chief, a good person. And he just had put a lot of work into something we needed to change. And honestly, I was focused on not tipping my hand that I hated the idea. I literally was focusing on my body language and trying to act like I was listening, but in my head I was like, "Oh, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Soon as he, soon as he left as soon as he left my office, I turned to my deputy chief, and I expected him to join my mental thought, my mental track here, and say, "God, that was stupid." But he looks at me and he goes, "That was the best idea I've heard all week." Now, my deputy chief, Kirk Hale, is an amazing human being, and when he and I weren't aligned, I knew I was the problem. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that he actually had a good idea, but when he was talking, I saw my personal fingerprints all over the way we did it, and therefore I resisted. And I just think there's a lot of that in this profession. That isn't the way I was trained. That isn't the way I think about it today. I put it in place. I own this, and that builds resistance. And it takes people like you and Chief Z and all the leaders that we know to push, and we have to push, and we have to use science and data and ask the right questions. Otherwise it's to remain static, and other people have to teach us the lesson. I think that's about it.
You
um
think you think we can change that? I mean, is there
yeah,
any?
you're doing it every day. You're doing it every day, Chief. To your point about cognitive load, that's a real thing. And the one thing that's going to happen to us, as I see it, is technology is going to bring us information and data faster than we can process it.
Mm,
And it's going to show up in ways that take our attention out of looking out that windshield.
mm.
And it's going to take our attention. We're going to be staring at the screen. It's like going to the doctor's office. My doctor couldn't describe me because he stares at his computer the whole time. That that we have to avoid. And when you reduce cognitive load, that's a meaningful thing.
You know, going with my comment about good leaders are risk takers. I think one of the bigger parts of today's fire chiefs, as you get towards your old part of your career, some folks are more worried about keeping their job than actually doing the job as a fire chief. And I think again that comes back to being a risk taker and looking further down the road to doing some things. But hey, just some thoughts. So hey, Brian. How do public safety associations play into change? And you know, uh, I've got a second part of that, but you just finished up as the California Fire Chiefs president. Just around, I think you had 700 plus registered. About over 650 actually showed up. The largest convenience of the California Fire Chiefs in the association's history. What a hats off to you and the board and Chief Meston. Can't say enough. But with that being said, what should they do or should you do more of to make some of these changes that we're talking about? Again, get that many chiefs in a room and other folks. What do we need to do?
Yeah, and thanks for that. But I don't know that I deserve much credit for that. I really believe that it's been coming. Last year we had one of our bigger conferences, and I'd like to give a lot of credit to, and we all know Jeff Meston, longtime
Yeah.
fire chief. He's the executive director of Cal Chiefs, and he's got a really, one of his talents is, fiscal, managing, budget, and he's been called into different associations and fire departments to fix, some fiscal problems, and he's very, very good at that, and he loves conferences, and they brought in a professional conference, last few, anyway. So I think there's a lot of people engaged in that, but I mean, I thought this was I think this is a really good question, because we've all belonged to or have belonged to associations, some that are really productive, some not so much, and not to sound like I'm blowing smoke, up your skirts, but Western, is a great example, I think, of an association that, is able to move mountains and that has moved mountains. I think Cal Chiefs, I don't know that they'll ever get to that level, but I think we're starting to see that their influence has become greater, certainly as it, certainly in the EMS area. I think some of the groups that didn't always listen to Cal Chiefs, because they didn't have much influence, are, the relationship with the California professional firefighters, the labor group, in California. Myself and President Rice are great friends, and
Yeah.
it goes back to relationships. We were great friends 20 years ago, and now he's the president of there, and I'm at Cal Chiefs, and so there's that mutual respect. So it ultimately goes back to relationships, but actually doing something. Dude, how many associations do we belong to, or have we belonged to, that really didn't do much, other than being able to put on I'm a member of whatever association. I try not to engage that much with those organizations, or go to those conferences. I look at Western's doing. We got Ignite. You've got, oh gosh, what's the one you guys just
Force.
focused?
Force. Yeah,
Force.
Force.
I
Yeah.
mean, all of these things that are not just focused on technology, but developing, people,
Right.
and getting to the mid-level, the BC division chiefs, and preparing them. Man, that's honorable work, right? And that's
Yeah.
looking out for the future. Um, Cal Chiefs isn't there yet, but Cal Chiefs now has a seat, on Fire Scope, so they're influencing, wildland fire policy, or at least as they can. EMS, they're sitting on committees that are going to determine exclusivity or lack thereof within our, state's EMS system. Associations are huge, but just joining a bunch of them to add to your resume, I would offer up to anybody watching this and that is a chief, or wants to be a chief, to really pick your associations carefully and ask yourself why. And Chief Johnson, I loved what you shared earlier, that what I heard you say in the previous is self-reflection, right? I
Yep.
mean, we got to be honest with ourselves, and that's hard to
Yep.
do, if you've got a big ego or you've got something else. I think, and maybe it's something because it comes with age, because I didn't always think that way. But when I get that burn in my belly or something that's bothering me or whatever, I have to ask myself, why is that bothering me? Is it
Right.
because, I'm the chief, and, that's not a good reason, and those sorts of things. But I don't want to detract from your question there, Chief Zagaris, but I would say choose your associations carefully. There are some that are doing amazing. I look at UEFA, the industry, the United Aerial Firefighters Association. Man, you talk about a group of industry experts when it comes to wildland fire aviation, both on the rotor wing and the fixed wing side. That's a group that, when this U.S. Wildland Fire Service, gets going, needs to have at the table. I think our federal partners have been resistant for many years to have industry sit at the table. And industry knows better than we know.
Mm-hmm.
They know this stuff. They're operating these aircraft, and then we government put limitations or requirements upon them that to them make no sense, because it makes no sense. We're not aviators typically, right? And so
Right.
I don't know. I'm getting a little bit on a soapbox here, so I'll just shut up and.
So, so, I'd add one thing, and as busy as you are each and every day, and the extra, assignments you take on for the organization, both for Orange County Fire Authority, Cal Chiefs, the Western USAR group, with FEMA. I mean, any number of things you're involved in. But I'd share this with you, JJ. So we had a breakout session on FirstNet there at Cal Chiefs, and Brian actually came in and sat in the room through the presentation, and Bob Roach, retired out of Corpus Christi, was in the room, and it was a pretty good discussion with the folks we had up there. And before I could, I was waiting. We just finished up the panel talking. I was taking a few questions, getting ready to bring up the discussion on reauthorization for FirstNet, and Bob Roach immediately, raised his hand and brings it up. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Bob. And we had a good conversation on it. As we broke, Brian went over to talk to Bob, and before we were done, John Paul Jones gets a call, and Brian's already working on a letter of support from Cal Chiefs for reauthorization for FirstNet. And so
Great.
it isn't just about attending, but when it comes back to what should we do, act, be decisive,
Right.
Strike where the iron's hot. And, thank you for that, Brian, and your engagement, as busy as you were at that conference and everything else. So thank you.
Well, I thought I might have overstepped. It occurred to me later that it was like a day after our new president took over. It's like, I may have overstepped my authority here. So, I figured as a past, it was close enough as a past president, but it goes back. I mean, and you saw the people in that room, Chief. I mean, these are things that we've heard, many of us, for a long, long time, but it was new information to so many others. And so I'm so glad that Christy Mercado and the group, that was there presented, Kevin Nida, and all those people, because, man, well, I may have heard it a bunch. Man, there's a lot of people that haven't, and we got to recognize that that's problematic. So the reauthorization, it's just this continuous education, because we're spinning through fire chiefs pretty darn fast these days.
Yeah, that's true. Well, if you think about it, FirstNet became law in 2012. That's 13 years ago. That's a half a fire service career.
Yeah.
That's a half of a life cycle. So, I think I think you make a very good point, and we just have to double down on it. Chief Fennessy, the last question we had for you today, I just want you to reflect a little bit. I walked by a sign in a window the other day, and the sign said, "I didn't know getting old would happen so fast." And, that kind of hit home a little bit as I
Right.
look at my white hair, right? So, so I have opinions, but I would like you to reflect. What was the best part of your career? Like, as you look back, what was the best part?
Man, that's a great question. And maybe a lot of people say this, but man, I loved being a firefighter. I loved being a
Yep.
firefighter. I mean, I love the fire service now. And I heard a fire chief at a Metro Chiefs conference years ago say that I think he presented that you got to love your firefighters, right? Even the bad
Yep.
ones. And
Yep.
and
Yep.
he defined what bad was. Didn't necessarily mean bad, but you really got to, as a fire chief, do that. But I try to be real with myself too. And I think of those days, on the hotshot cruise and some of the things we did and the experiences we had and how it bonded us, right?
Yep.
I've been told somewhat like, combat veterans and those sorts of things. And I don't want to make the same comparison because, combat veterans have experienced something, that I could never, right? Not having served in the military or in combat. But it comes down to, right, shared experiences of hardship. And well, nowadays, those thoughts, oh man, wasn't that cool? Back then, it wasn't so cool. It was hot. It was miserable. The poison oak was no fun. Cutting into the tree and the bees coming out and biting you and the bears chasing you in Alaska. That stuff wasn't fun, but man, it seems like it was really fun now, right? But it comes down to those shared experiences. And then, like yourselves, working in busy firehouses. I couldn't be at a slow one. I don't know if it was the ADD or the adrenaline junkie in me or whatever, but I love being around others that, had shared purpose, and you hear about folks, the person next to you and the person on the right, the left, some of that same thing. I was texting my old partner just last night. There was a semi reunion over the weekend, a very small group, about 15 of us that served in the 90s at the busiest firehouse in San Diego. And oh man, just the story. I don't even remember some of the stuff. I'm sure they've gotten better, but it was just that unique bond, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of HR issues. Now we were some pirates, and there's probably still some paper in my file down there because of some of the too much fun we've had. But Chief, that to me was. I was telling last night, Matt Praisner. I says, man, I never had the appreciation for. I never had to worry about my back in a fire. He's one
Yeah.
of the best firefighters, and I went into a lot of fires brave and unconcerned because, man, I knew my partner. He was a great firefighter, and he was kind enough and said the same thing.
Yeah.
But those are the times, right? I look back. I mean, yes, we've accomplished stuff moving up through the organization, and all the jobs, engineer, captain, all those were great freaking jobs. But the higher you go up, you start to get your satisfaction out of watching others succeed. I wanted to be the first guy in the door. I wanted to be the hoist operator on the helicopter. And I trained people to do all those things, right? I wanted to ride up front. That was like my goal when I got San Diego. We're going to bring helicopter service here because it's cool. I'm going to ride up front like I did, my previous life, and man, dropping water all day. Just the most fun ever, right? More
Yeah.
fun than you can have. And quickly you move past that because now somebody has some idea on how you can be even lead even at a higher level. And so you've got to, and it was hard at first, right? You'd see fires and go, God, I should have been there. I would have. Now I get great satisfaction out of seeing our people there and being successful. But going back to your original question, Chief, I just loved being a firefighter. I loved it.
Yeah. I do. I've always believed if you didn't love climbing on rigs and serving people, you probably weren't very good at it. Because to me, best thing ever, climbing in a rig and going to help people. Like so many of us are helpers by nature, and we're still helpers, which drives us as chief officers to help the people that serve the community in our organizations. It's really all about helping them do what they do better and get them better tools and better methodologies. And that all goes to the service oriented heart. Well, Chief Fennessy, that's been a really nice slice of time with you today. You know how much we love and appreciate you, Chief Zagaris. It's always a blessing to spend time with you. Thanks for all you continue to do for the fire service. And Chief Fennessy, I got to say, I look forward every week to the changes you and California is going to make. California is leading the country in so many ways, and we know it's the leadership of you, people like you, Cal Chiefs. We're blessed to have your service. So I want to just thank you on behalf of the profession for what you do for us, and thanks for spending time on our podcast today.
No, I loved it being around a couple mentors and friends. I mean, this is a lot of fun for me. So and thank you for what you do. At least they're paying me to do what I do. They're not paying you guys necessarily to do what you're doing. So your passion for the fire service and improving it long past your retirement, man, it's extremely admirable. Thank
Now
you.
we've just worked too many hours when we were working. Now we don't have any hobbies, so everyone's kind of stuck with us for a while.
Thank you,
Chiefs,
Steve.
thank you very much. We'll wrap up, but I once again thank you for your service.
Thank you.